Hi all and welcome to my channel, it's Kaz here. Today we're going to be working with granny squares. As you can see, I have 6 granny squares. Now, I've been learning how to crochet and trying to improve my skills on that front for a long time. So, as everybody normally starts with granny squares, that's where I started. So then I thought, what am I going to do with all these lovely granny squares? So I thought, I've got an idea, and this is the idea. So these are 5-inch granny squares, okay, and I've got 6 of them, as you can see here. And I'll just grab my ruler for you now to show you. And there you can see they're about just coming up to 5 inches there, okay, from left to right. So they're 5-inch square. Now 6 of these, okay, this is what we plan to do. We're going to connect them together in alternating colours like that, okay, all the way along, and another blue one on the edge there which you can't see. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to stitch them together, put them face together, and we're going to stitch them along there so we end up with a long line of them. And then we're going to stitch together that line like that, so we end up with a tube. All right, now then, this might be giving the game away, but you've already seen the thumbnail, so you know where we're headed. Then we are going to attach them to our Addi machine or our Sentro 48, and we're going to make a beanie from them. Okay, so let's get started with that next. Now we're going to join our granny squares together. These are all face side up, so we're going to put face side to face side, alternating colours like that, but you can do any colour you like, of course you can. And the way I'm going to do it is a mattress stitch, and I'm going to catch a bar. Now we have to make sure that these are going to run straight, so we might need to do a little bit of tweaking afterwards. So right at the bottom, catch the bar on your chain there, which reminds me of a coffee bean. I'm going to leave a little tail, and in between each coffee bean there's a bar. Same as mattress stitching something together like a stuffy or something like that. And we're going to catch that bar, if I can find it. There we go. Leave that tail. And on the next bar and the next bar and so on, we're going to catch that bar. Move up there to that one. Like that, all the way up. Attaching our squares together. Trying to talk and concentrate on sewing up granny squares is not easy. So that's the way I'm doing it. If you've got your own preferred way of doing it, and there are loads and loads of videos on YouTube showing you how to join granny squares. You can crochet them together, stitch them in various different ways. This is just the way I've chosen to do it. So I'm going to mattress stitch up, because I'm guessing most people who have done a knitting project on their Addi or Sentro has come across mattress stitch before. And keeping it even all the way up. Move to that one actually. That's what I'm going to do. So I'll finish this one now, and then we're just going to add them together in a row, and then we're going to join them together to make a tube. Pull that together now, as we do with mattress stitch, and we should get a nice neat join. Mattress stitch nice and tight. And there we have a nice join on our project. Okay, so we need to secure our ends now, top and bottom, making sure that they are running nice and flat without that little gap there. If you see it dipping down there, you need to pull that in a little bit more by stitching up the next stitch along, okay? So the next stage you're going to do now is get a blue one, and these are right sides up, so this is the right side, so right sides together. We'll stitch down there exactly the same way, and then we'll flop that one like that, and then we'll get a yellow one, right sides together, stitch there like that, and flop that over, and then we'll get our blue one, right sides again, stitch down there and flop it over, and we'll get our last one, right side to right side, stitch down there like we just did, flop that over, and at that point I'll come back and we'll stitch it together and make our tube. Now that our 6 granny squares are connected in a row, and as you can see I put a stitch marker there so I know what my right side is, because it does get a little complicated sometimes, we are now going to put our right sides together and make a tube. Now when you do this one, leave a long tail, a really long tail on one end, because we'll be using that on the Addi or the Sentro in order to make a connection. Alright, so exactly the same as we did before. Mattress stitch all the way up. Okay, I'm going to do a little connecting stitch this time on this one, just so I can leave my long tail there like that, so I know that that tail is secured. Okay, so I've got a tail there probably 6 or 7 inches long, and then I'm going to continue to join these two together exactly the same way as we joined the other sections together. Mattress stitch all the way up through those little coffee beans, or however way you prefer to do it, whichever way rather you prefer to do it, all the way up, and then we are ready to move on to using our machine. When stitching the final 2 granny squares together to form the tube, leave a tail at the beginning and the end, okay, because we'll be using them later on to attach to our knitted part of our beanie. Top, put our mattress stitch nice and tight so we get a really good neat edge and fixing there, and we can turn it the right side out, remembering that this is our finishing when we need that tail. There we are, that's a really decent join there, I'm happy with that. So I'm going to make sure now that I'm flush along the top there. So all I do for that, and all I did for the rest of them, was to just put a stitch in a little higher up to secure that in place. Nothing complicated. And now you can see this is our tube, done and dusted. Don't worry if you're slightly out there, we can pull that in when we add it onto the machine. Okay, and the reason we've done a tube like that, which is approximately 30 inches all the way around, remember we've got 6 of these granny squares and they're about 5 inches each, or 6 5s are 30, is the circumference of the Addi bed is approximately 30 inches. Okay, so I'm not quite sure what the Sentro is, probably maybe an inch more because you've got more stitches, so probably 31 possibly. But there is stretch in this, of course, but we don't want to put too much pressure and tension on our needles when we are adding this onto the bed. Alright, so I must make a disclaimer there that you're going to have to be very careful adding it onto your machine and not to put too much pressure on those needles. Alright, okay, so let's move on to using our Addis and our Sentros. So now we have connected all our little squares together and we have a nice circle. Okay, and here we have my stitch marker which tells me this is the side I want to be the right side of my work. The right side goes towards the side of your machine so that the wrong side is on the inside. Okay, like it is when you're normally using your knitting machine. And like I've said before, the circumference of the Addi is about 30 inches, and as you can see here, this is about 30 inches as well, with 6 5-inch squares. So now we go on to attaching this circle that we've made onto our machine. And as you can see, I've left a tail there, so I'm going to use that as my first port of call, in order to attach it to my machine. And hopefully we're going to be able to attach it without using anything, but I've got a loom hook here, and this is my really old one that I snapped and stuck back together by melting the plastic. So a loom hook is handy for this, okay? But what we're going to be doing, and I hope you can see, is you can see these stitches here that I call coffee beans, okay? That there. And that is what I'm going to be flicking over onto my needle, okay, all the way along, not forcing them on, but kind of feeling my way as I go along, and you'll see how we do that next. So I've zoomed in so you can get a really good look at what I'm doing here, and I've got my needle 1 ready to go, and I've zeroed the clock on my counter as well. And I'm going to start with this stitch here, okay? You can start with that stitch there, okay? And my black needle is up, and I'm going to slip that over there like that. Now you can possibly do it with your fingers, okay? And as you crank around, so I'm going to put my loom pick on the table for a minute, leave my string down there, and as you crank around, you'll be able to feel which stitch will go next. Now don't force it, don't try and pull this one over there, don't try and do that. Okay, so we're going to go for the next viable stitch, which is going to be this one for me. Okay, I'll pop it over and scoot it down and crank forward a little bit, and then you can see your stitch going down. They don't always go around there for some strange reason, but I haven't had any issue with that. And as I'm going around then, I'm going to be grabbing the next viable stitch and pushing that on my machine and cranking forward again and finding the next viable stitch. There you go, there it is there. Okay, that's my next viable stitch. Popping that on there, cranking on, and that's all we do all the way around. Now that one is going to be too tight. I don't want to pull that one over there, so I'm going to miss that one out, and I'm going to go for the next one and just pop that over, scoot around. Again, I think this one is going to be too tight. It's going to be too much pressure on the needles, so go for the next one. Push that on, crank around. Again there, that's going to be too tight, so go for the next one and pop that on. Look for your next needle to be high up, and that's a nice easy peasy one. And again this one here, I am going to stretch this one a little bit, because although it's tight across there now, when you pop it down it isn't so tight, see? Okay, like I said, under advisement, be careful doing this. This is just a way I've found to incorporate my granny squares into my knitting projects. So please be careful when you're attempting this, not to put too much pressure on your needles, alright? But this is all you do, is carry on going all the way around, picking up the best stitch that you can find that isn't going to put too much pressure on your needles or your machine bed. Now this one I'm not going to use that one, that's too tight. If I tried to pull that over there, I'm going to pull this needle and cause problems. So I'm going to go for that one, and that one's a little bit of a stretch, but it's fine. And again, pop that over there like that. This one, no, I can't do that one, it's too tight. So I'm going to go for that one, and I'm going to pop that one on. And this one is lining up nicely with the front of the needle there, so I'm going to pop that one on. Watch the tips of your needles there when you're doing that, okay, because they're quite thin there. So this one I can't use it, see, it's too much over to that side, so I'm going to go for the next viable stitch, which will be this one thereabout, if I can grab him. Still learning crochet, so I'm not saying any of my granny squares are perfect, they are far from that, but it's something that I've enjoyed learning. So I'm going to grab that one. That's a little bit of a tight one, so I'm going to move him over a little bit and see how he lines up, and that's going to be too tight. So I'm going to move across to the next one and pop it on like that. And just keep on going all the way around your machine. And actually moving the bed around just a tad more gives you a better idea of where these stitches are going to sit once you move your carriage around a little bit. And I'm going to carry on doing this now. That I think is going to be a little bit too tight, so we may have to go with the next stitch over, but we will try. Now I'm going to go with the next stitch over there. Like I said, it's all about making sure that we don't put too much pressure on our carriage and on our needles, but still get the desired result. There you go, pop that over there like that, and crank around. Some stitches will line up really nicely, and others will be a little bit of a do I or don't I situation. But I really do think that the result is really nice, and something that you can do a little bit different to your normal beanies, and even the patterns that you can find in my playlist. And like I said before, if you don't make or crochet yourself, maybe you know somebody who does, and they can make you some granny squares, and you can even buy them in packs. I've seen them online for sale in various websites. I'm sure you know the ones I'm talking about. The crafters sell things that people can make use of. Well, that's a tricky part of my really dodgy crochet. Oh, there's the stitch there, disappeared a little bit, so we'll catch him. We'll move that on a little bit. There we go, and he's on. So carry on now, we're coming around nicely. I know you can't see all of that, but there seems to be plenty of slack on the rest of the project. So we're going to pull that one through there. There's no need to put undue pressure when you've got 6 5-inch squares for the Addi anyway. I haven't tried this on the Sentro 48, but I'm sure, I'm confident, I'm not sure, but I'm confident that 6 5-inch squares would probably work really well on the 46, sorry, on the 48 as well. So I'm going to move across to that one now, so we're not putting any undue pressure on. So you get the idea of how to transfer your stitches onto the bed of your machine. Just going to crank back a little bit there and grab that stitch and pop that one on there like that. Great. And as we're coming around now, everything appears to be lining up really nicely. And I've zoomed in so you can see exactly what I'm doing. I hope it's making sense to you. It really isn't as complicated as all that. And that one slipped over nicely there, but don't worry about that too much. It actually works out really well in the end. Now as we're coming around here, we've got just enough slack, as you can see there, to get the rest of these on our needles without any undue tension causing any problems. There we go, catching the last few coffee bean stitches, as I call them. And we're nearly at the end now, so it's working out really nicely. I've got 3 stitches left to pop on. And 2. The last 2 are the trickiest ones because you're coming towards the end, and this is my last stitch coming on now, and as you can see that's working out really nicely there. I'm going to drop that down a little bit. Let's drop that stitch down a little bit, there we go, so we get a little bit more leverage, and pop that stitch on there like that. And there we are, back to the beginning. So just for a little bit of a pull to pull my work down. So when you're knitting your beanie, you have to factor in the fact that you've already knitted this amount of work technically, okay? I'm working on 5 rows per inch, so I'm working that out as roughly 25 rows, but that's based on my yarn, which is Aran yarn, and my tension and my machine, okay? So if you know how many rows you get per inch, work to that. Alright, so from now on we need to put on our yarn, and I'll just go and get my yarn now. Now treat this as if you were changing yarn colours. Okay, it's as simple as that. Once all these are on the bed, okay, a little bit of tug them down just a tad. Add your yarn as you would if you were doing a colour change. Okay, now the first row can be a little bit on the tight side, obviously because we've put these stitches on. So take your time, but keep some tension on the yarn, otherwise your first row is going to be too loose and it's not going to look very nice at all. So I'm going to tie those two together now. That's why we leave the yarn tail on there, so we've got a point of contact. Okay, so gently crank around, keeping the tension on your yarn as if you were knitting a normal colour change, okay? But take your time and watch these stitches fall down. Some of them may need a little bit of help, okay? But keeping that, now that one there isn't falling down as it should. But we'll keep on going and hope for the best. One is catching there somewhere. There we go, sorted. Watch them down. So it's a combination of keeping the tension on your yarn and watching these stitches pop down. Okay, and then once you've got your first row down, you're all fine then, really. Take it easy on the second one, I suggest. There we are, we're back to needle 1. That's our first row down on our connection between our granny squares and our main body of knitting. So we're going to do another one. Keeping an eye on our stitches that are falling. That one's a little bit tight for me, so I'll pop him down. And there we go. Taking our time all the way around, keeping our normal tension so we get a nice clean join in between there. I'm going to tighten up my join, and that's row 2. Okay, so for the main body of my beanie I'm going to be doing 80 rows, and that's going to form the liner and the brim, because I do not want a fold up brim on mine. If you want a fold up brim, I suggest that you do another 20 to 30 rows on the main body. Okay, so that'd be 100 to 110 rows. I'm going to be doing 80 rows, and after that turn your work around, okay, and attach the other end exactly the same way as we attach this, and do 4 to 5 rows and cast off as normal. That's all you have to do. So I'm going to do my 80 rows now, okie dokie, and then I will be transferring the other side onto the bed exactly the same way as I did with this one, and just knitting probably 5 rows and casting off as normal. So when you've done that now, I shall see you back and we shall have a look at our beanies together, and then we'll assemble it. Okay, but assembly really is technically exactly the same as making a normal beanie. So I'll see you very soon. And once you've done your 80 rows, just do your casting off as you normally do. And our work is off the machine, fantastic. And what we're going to do now is to turn our work around, and we're going to do exactly the same on this end. We're going to attach our stitches all the way around the bed of the machine again, okay, and we're going to do 4 to 5 rows, okay, and this will provide a nice little crown on top of your beanie in which to attach a pom-pom if you just so desire after you've finished. Okay, so that's my plan now. So we're going to start now by picking up the underside of each of these coffee bean stitches, as I call them. I'm using my loom pick here, but I'm going to show you a completely different way of doing it now, and that's feeding the stitches on one by hand rather than using the loom pick. Because in the previous section when I did the other side I showed you how to do it with a loom pick, but if you haven't got a loom pick or you prefer not to use one, then this is another way that you can load the stitches onto each of the needles with just your hands. So here you are with the first one, pop it over the stitch. The next one, and remember only to choose the ones that are viable for that needle in particular. Do not stretch your fabric to the left in order to make it fit. Alright, that's going to cause undue stress on your bed, and you really don't want that. And line it up as best you can. You're going to get gaps, and that's perfectly fine. So just keep going one by one, picking each of the stitches that line up with the best needle. As you can see now that's too tight there, okay, so don't pull that next stitch from the one you just loaded. Don't pick that one, that's too tight. You'll be putting way too much pressure on your machine there and your needles. So go to the next available stitch along, and that one lined up lovely there. So then that one's a little too tight, so don't pick that one again. Don't put the pressure on your needles or your machine. Pick the next stitch along, and that's working out really nicely now. Same there, don't go for that one, pick the next one that's almost or in line with the needle that you need to load next. And that one's a lovely one, that slides on lovely. That one again. And work your way all around the bed, exactly like we did the other side. This is just a slightly different technique, using your hands and your fingers rather than using the loom pick. And if you notice, the way we're doing this one is we're not moving the carriage as far to the right as we did when we used the loom pick. We can load the stitches on a little more to the left hand side of the yarn feeder there. So it is a slightly different way of doing it, but it works out exactly the same. So I thought I'd show you both ways, and then you can choose which way you prefer to load your stitches onto your machine. And I'm going to fast forward now shortly through the rest of it, rather than show you every stitch going on, because you've seen that already. Coming to the end now, our last few needles to do. We have 2 more needles to do, and we're lining up really nicely here. There we go, and there's our last needle coming on. Fantastic. Now add your main yarn as we did with the other side, and knit 5 to 6 rows, forming the crown of the beanie. So after casting on the other side of the beanie onto my bed of my machine, I've done 5 rows, and I'm just casting off now as normal. And there's the short end of our beanie completed. And here is our work off the machine, and it's looking really nice, isn't it? As you can see, the main body of the knit pulls that into a lovely kind of mushroom shape, and I really like that. So what we're going to do next is to check our joins along here, okay, to make sure we've got no gaps that we can put a stitch in to correct. And I'm looking around there now, and it's looking really pretty good. That is my dodgy crochet, okay, so if your crochet is better than mine, you won't get those little loops on your crochet panel. Now we've got a little gap there, so what I'm going to do is going to go in behind, and I'm going to put a stitch in there, and that's where we joined at the beginning. Okay, so tighten up your colour joins as well. And I can actually use that tail now to put a few stitches in to correct that slight gap in our join. So I'm just going to slip stitch across there now to tidy that up a little bit. And these little gaps will probably crop up from time to time due to the way that the stitches and the hooks on your machine line up or don't line up quite on target. So that should cover that little anomaly there, hopefully with just a quick bit of stitching, but we will check that before we finish off our work. Let's trim these tails because we can always add a fresh piece of yarn if we need it. So let's go back and double check that now, and that's looking pretty good. Quite happy with that. So we carry on checking all the way around, and I'm pretty happy with that, apart from that one anomaly. That's great, and it looks really nice added into the crochet part there, the knit, as you can see there. Give you a closer look of it. It looks really quite nice and really quite neat and tidy, apart from my dodgy crochet. And as I explained, I did the same the other side. I've done 4 rows. I think I did 5 rows actually. And I'm doing the same here now, checking around to make sure that we've got a good join between our crochet and our knit area. And that's oh, there we are, we've got a little gap there, so I'll put a few stitches in there, and then we'll make our beanie up, which is going to be exactly the same as making up any other beanie. So I'll just put a little stitch in there now. As you can see, the stitch gap was a little wide, so I'll get some yarn and I'll correct that, and then we'll assemble the beanie. So I've repaired that last little section on the top end there, and we are going to just put the one inside the other now, the one end inside the other. And I did 80 rows there, okay, because I don't want a turn-up brim on my particular beanie, but if you want a turn-up brim, do more rows, okay? So work to whatever size you make. And just to say that this area here, the 5 inches on my yarn and tension of about 5 rows per inch, is giving me approximately 25 rows, equivalent to that knit area there, okay? So one end inside the other, as if we're doing a normal beanie. This is the way I do it anyway. Everybody's got their own way of assembling a beanie, of course. Oh, I forgot my little colour join there, so we'll tighten that up. Put a little knot in there. Really caught myself out there. There we go, sorted. So we're going to draw that together and the inner one together. So I'll cinch the inner one first actually. And some people like to thread through all the loops on both sides of the beanie. I've never done it like that, but if that's your way of doing it, then you carry on and do it whichever way suits you best. And I like to bring this one up then, like that. And then with this one pulled up inside there, we've got a really long tail on here now, horrendously long, so I'm going to snip that and save that for some sewing up later. Try and keep all my ends. I even use them for stuffing, stuffies and things like that. Everything's got a use, isn't it, when you're a crafter? And I like to tie that nice and tight then, without snapping it, of course. I've got a couple of little knots in there like that. And I usually put a double knot as well, just to make sure, and then probably a few stitches in there as well, in between the 2 layers. And then we'll pop our hand in and stuff, push everything out to the top so it's nice and neat. And there you get like a mushroom shape. And there's my dodgy joins there, so I'll trim those off. Isn't that a lovely shape on a beanie? That's really nice. And of course, if you do more rows here than I did, the 80, then you'd get a turn-up brim like that, but obviously lower down. Okay, so I quite like it. As you can see, the joins are quite neat. Taking your time on your machine, okay? And of course you can add a pom-pom then, okay? You can add a pom-pom onto the top of your beanie there. And I love this colour combination. I think it's fabulous. So what do you think? Do you like this project? Do you think it's something you could try? But like I said, and I've said before, okay, be careful when you're putting these stitches on your machine. Make sure that you've got a minimum size of the circumference of your machine. And my Addi is about 30 inches around the inner circumference of the machine, okay? So the Sentro is going to be a little bit more than that, maybe ½ inch to 1 inch more, but that's the finished article, and it's a lovely mushroomy shape, and it gives a lot of space in there for people with large hair or a larger head, and that's really, really nice. And here's one I made in lilac as well, and that is really pretty. This was at the beginning of my granny square journey, so they're not quite as tight and as neat as they should be, but it still makes for a really pretty hat, okay? And again, I put a nice little contrasting colour by threading the other end on as well. So, granny square mushroom beanie. I hope you like this project. If you do, please give us a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And if you are a subscriber, thank you ever so much for your support. And if you do make these and share them on social media, please tag me, CraftyCaz33 on Instagram and Kaz Harris on Facebook. And I'll see you next time with another project. I hope you like this one. Bye for now. Hwyl fawr. Add a pom-pom there as well, okay?